This has been a great legislative conference. We're here to speak to Congress and advocate for our industry, and I think it's only fitting that we start off this meeting with the decision makers themselves, and we're pleased to have some of our congressional leadership coming in to talk to us about transportation and infrastructure. This is an important time for advocacy in Washington, and we need champions in Congress to work together and help to advance the programs and funding on behalf of public transportation and infrastructure. We need to meet with the members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, that support, the ones that support public transportation and the ones that don't support public transportation. This is a bipartisan effort, and it's an effort for us to actually educate and help inform them of the importance of funding and public transportation to our communities. So the meetings today that you will attend are important to our industry. It's a real opportunity to tell our story. We've provided you information briefs and documents that you can use to help represent our industry's positions, but they also want to hear, these Congress folks want to also hear about your successes. They want to hear about your challenges, what's happening locally in the districts that they represent. And similarly for our APTA members from the private sector, it's a good opportunity to show how the goods and services you provide to the transit industry helps generate jobs and economic development. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers today, and they are the true leaders on Capitol Hill on infrastructure issues. Our first speaker is Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island. Senator Reed is a vital ally as the ranking member of the Transportation, House, and Urban Development Appropriations Subcommittee. This is where the capital investment grants, rail programs, and other vital programs are funded. We would especially like to thank Senator Reed for his leadership in pressing the administration to move ahead with the grant agreements for vetting and getting them ready as CIG projects. I'd like to ask Amy Patine, the Interim Chief Executive Officer for the Rhode Island Public Transportation Authority in Providence, Rhode Island, to introduce Senator Reed. Amy?
Good morning. Great. So today I have the honor to introduce Senator Jack Reed, the senior member of our state's congressional delegation and an outstanding example of public service and good government. Senator Reed has represented Rhode Island as a U.S. Senator since 1997, and as was mentioned, he's a senior member of the Appropriations Committee, as well as a ranking member of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. He is unwavering in his dedication to his constituents and the entire country on key issues such as jobs, transportation, defense, education, and the environment. Through his work, he has shown himself to be a true champion for public transit. The Rhode Island Public Transit Authority is fortunate to work with him as we constantly strive to improve our service to the public. Senator Reed has consistently assisted our transit agency by providing support for federal funding opportunities and working with us to ensure both his constituents, who are also our passengers, have the best transit system possible. It is my pleasure to introduce Senator Jack Reed.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank all of you for your great efforts across the country, particularly thank your chair, Nat Ford. Thanks, Nat, for your great leadership and your efforts. And Amy, thank you for your kind words, and also for your great leadership at the Rhode Island Public Transportation Association, RIPTR. Amy and her team at RIPTR do a great job. They move more than 16.5 million trips a year throughout the state of Rhode Island. We have a straight-wide transit system. They're helping people get to jobs, get to work, get to appointments, get to all the things they need to do, and they're essential to the fabric of our country. But I'm a little bit biased. My great-grandfather and my grandfather were motormen on the trolleys in Rhode Island. In fact, I remember hearing my mother talking about the United Electric Railroad Company, and then when I was a boy, it was the United Transit Company. So this RIPTR, it's a new thing for me. But thank you, Amy, for the hard work, all you do, and your colleagues. I'm coming here today with basically two hats. First, I'm a member of the Senate Banking Committee, and the committee oversees the authorization for transit policy and writes the transit title of our multi-year surface transportation law. And in that role, my most important goal is ensuring that mass transit account continues to receive its fair share of funding in relation to other modes of transportation. It's absolutely essential to the investment we make in transit throughout this country. Second, I am here in my role as the ranking member of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, where I work with Chairman Susan Collins to oversee federal funding for our nation's transit and rail systems and our other transportation infrastructure. I must say it is a real pleasure working with Senator Collins. She is thoughtful, committed, extraordinarily dedicated United States Senator. And the bills we've produced together reflect the subcommittee's bipartisan work, and emphasize bipartisan, to assess and to address national needs and craft funding bills that meet these needs. And in this room, it's easy to say that transit is an indispensable component of not only our national transportation network, but our economy and indeed our life, our quality of life. You know that transit service drives economic growth. It helps communities grow, expand. It improves the quality of life. Businesses want transit service. Young people want transit service. Seniors want transit service. Disabled Americans want transit service. That demand continues to grow. But even with all these selling points, we all have a tough job to make the case to other audiences, especially, I must say, the current administration, which seems to regard transit as either a local issue or something only for coastal elites, and that's not the case at all. And frankly, it's been surprising and a bit shocking to me to see that an administration that came into office talking about investing in infrastructure proposes such deep cuts in the transportation, especially transit, over the next several years. I've been especially disappointed, for example, at the proposed elimination of the Tiger grants and the phase out of the transit capital investment grants. This isn't a particularly partisan political critique of the administration, because both sides of the aisle on my subcommittee, particularly in appropriations, have roundly criticized these proposed cuts as counterproductive to our economy and to our communities. Indeed, the Senate Transportation Bill, Appropriations Bill that we passed, increased funding for Tiger grants on a bipartisan basis, provided strong funding for the transit capital investment grants to ensure we meet the needs of projects across the country. We're very proud of that bipartisan bill that we passed in our committee. The funding levels we provided for surface transportation would make significant investments and create jobs and rebuild and improve our nation's infrastructure. And because Democrats insisted that we have a significant non-defense discretionary spending increase as well as a defense spending increase, the recent budget agreement has provided a broad commitment to provide an additional $20 billion in infrastructure funding in 2018 and 2019, which will be an enormous help to all types of transportation. Now, we need to finish out our work to close out the appropriations process so that we can deploy these resources. In our subcommittee, we've negotiated, we think, a very, very good deal. But that work is now jeopardized by the administration's refusal to allow any funds to be used for the replacement of the 110-year-old wooden Portal Bridge in New Jersey, placing the safety and efficiency of the entire Northeast Corridor at risk. This critical project is being used as a political football by the White House. It is disturbing to see safety projects held hostage in order to gain concessions for other and sometimes unpopular administration priorities. We're fighting this approach and seeking a positive resolution for the negotiations as we approach our March 23rd deadline, which is much sooner than we'd like to think about. And I hope we can resolve these issues. I hope we can do it quickly and then produce a very broad infrastructure package. Now, you know, last February, the administration finally came forward with their infrastructure plan, about a year late. The plan makes, I think, unsustainable promises by promoting tolls and other funding gimmicks that will burden everyday Americans in order to entice or attempt to entice private sector investment. But if you look even closer, while the plan promises $200 billion in new funding over 10 years, The administration simultaneously plans to slash federal funding for existing transportation programs by more than $360 billion over the next decade. Now, I went to West Point, so I had to take math, but 200 minus 360 is minus something. That's not a good... I was an infantry officer, please. I didn't get into the Corps of Engineers, ladies and gentlemen. So this is obviously some type of, it's not even a starting position to talk seriously about the major need for infrastructure investment in the United States. So what we have to do is, what we've tried to do on our side is to put a real program in for $1 trillion in transportation spending over 10 years. That is paid for. And it will strengthen our infrastructure, strengthen our environment, our economy, and it will also include investments not just in highways, roads, and bridges, but in transit, because as we all know here, it's absolutely critical to our economy to do that. And I hope that we can, on this issue of infrastructure, come together with a real program that is positive numbers, real numbers, that will invest in our economies all through this country. We have to keep up our commitment to public transportation. And you're going to be here, and your voice is absolutely critical. We can make policy pronouncements, we can give speeches, et cetera, but when you walk into your member's office or your senator's offices and talk about the impact it has in their states and in their districts, small towns and big towns, rural areas and urban areas, they start listening. And when you get them listening, that gives us a chance to close the deal. So thank you very much. And I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize Earl Baumgartner, my old friend and colleague from Oregon, who probably rode a bike down here in the rain. He's a devoted transit enthusiast. Ladies and gentlemen, good luck, and thank you for what you do. Thank you.